Last week we prepared this rough sawn material to go through my thickness planer. However, there's some things that I didn't understand and there's some things that I made mistakes on here, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, and some things that I can still correct now before I run them through the thickness planer. First off, I just want to say that I'm a carpenter. I am not a woodworker. So my knowledge to woodworking is not the greatest. If you want to learn from my mistakes, watch this video. I have picked up a lot of tips and a lot of ways I can do this better and get a better job than what I was originally going to get if I didn't put the brakes on. Watch some YouTube videos, Woodworker's Web, some other videos, and get some ideas of how to run these through my planer and get the proper outcome that I want, because it was going to be a disaster. Hi everybody, I'm Jim Dierdorf and this is Detroit DIY. Let's avert a disaster. It's hard to believe that someone can build you a home but yet totally screw up a kitchen table. That is not my kind of build. The expansion and contraction of multiple pieces of wood glued together, I do not have a thorough understanding. A planer, a thickness planer, I've never used one in my life, so I wasn't sure what to expect, but I kind of thought that I could run a cupped board through it and that it would flatten it. But it won't flatten it. It's merely going to make both sides smooth. The feed rollers in the planer, which we'll talk about here shortly, provide a lot of tension or pressure on top of the wood, and especially softer woods, it can push warps and cups out as it goes through the planer, making the surface nice and smooth, but when it comes out the other side, that cup or twist is just going to return and you'll just have a smooth cupped piece of wood. That is not what I want. I want to get these cups out. I want to get any of the twists out. So we're going to do that. First thing I'm going to do is make a sled for my planer. I have a piece of melamine shelving here. This probably isn't the ideal material to be using for this, but it's what I could get my hands on in a pinch, so it's what we're going to use. And what the sled is going to do is provide me a flat uniform surface. I have sleds for my table saw. Never had a clue in the world that you could use a sled for a thickness planer. So I want to glue this piece on here just as a stop. And glue doesn't work so good on the melamine, so I've taken my razor knife and I've scored here where I want to glue. Now I'm just going to go ahead and peel away this melamine and get that piece glued on. I have the first board that I'm going to send through the planer sitting here on this sled. I've got this piece glued on, it's clamped, we're going to wait for it to dry. I have the cupped side down so that the board is rocking like this. Now I have options here. I can put shims in underneath each side in multiple places to stop the board from rocking, or I can put a strip down the center of it, turn it over. That way these shims will prevent the rollers in the planer from pushing the cup out of this board and instead cut it off. Best case scenario, or what you would typically do to prevent this, is to run these through a jointer. One, I don't have a jointer, and two, even if I did, it won't joint a board this wide. So I would have to cut it into thinner strips and then do a glue up and put them all back together, and that's just not what I want to do. So we are going to glue these strips on right down the center of this board. I'm going to do that with a hot glue gun. It wouldn't matter what glue you use to do this, because even if you glued it on with wood glue, once you got the other side flat, you could turn it over, send it through the planer, and basically remove these strips, the glue, until you have your finished face. So what I want to do is just get some dabs of hot glue on here, probably 4 of them, and then we'll flip it over and we'll get it on. just want to get that stuck on there. 4 little dabs. Let it cool off for a second. Now I'm just going to continue down and glue those on. Now with all these strips glued on here, I need to go through with my straight edge and see what I've got. They're too thick. I know they're too thick, and I'm going to have to remove some of this material. So I just want to find the point where, so right here, I'm sitting good. Here, I start to get a little teeter-totter. Here it gets worse. And here it's worse. I have teeter-totter here. So basically, we'll draw a line on it here. Everything through here needs to get a reduction in thickness. And I'm going to do that with my sander. So about right through to here. So all of this. So I've got some 80 grit on my random orbital sander, and I am just going to go through and sand these down. I'm going to sand them a little bit, check them, sand it, check them, until I get it to where it's nice all the way across. And these little spaces I've left in between are no big deal. So I just want to do a little bit. Check them. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. So from about here out, I just need to remove a little bit more. Let's check it again. That is good. That's what I want. So I'm going to continue on down through here and get all of these to where I'm touching on this edge and this edge with my straight edge or my square, and right here. At this point in time, I've got this where I'm really happy with it. My straight edge is touching on this edge, and right in the center. So I am ready to get this flipped over and set on this sled. Now, with it on the sled, I want to check and make sure that it's not twisted. See, and I see that end over there wiggling a little bit. So let's come over to this end. And I do have a slight little twist in it. All in all, it's just not bad. What I have going on is very minimal. So at this point in time, what I want to do, just to kind of hold this on the workpiece, I'm happy with it. I am not going to try to shim these corners. I believe that I'll still wind up with a extremely flat piece of material here. I am going to use a little hot glue and glue this to my melamine sled so that it doesn't move around at all. I want it attached. So I'm just going to put a decent sized puddle right here. And the same thing here. I'm going to set this board right back down in it. Hold that on there for a minute. I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to do the same thing down here. Down here, I am just going to put a nice little bead of hot glue right across the end in a few places. Kind of like a little weld. We'll let that cool off. Make sure that we're stuck. I'm going to do the same thing right here. I'm going to add a little more. I have the planer all set up and ready to go. All I had to do out of the box was install this knob and put the dust collection on it. And it is ready to go. I checked these outfeed tables to make sure that they were adjusted properly, and they are. So we are ready to feed our first piece of wood through. I have my outfeed roller set up right here on this side to help me get everything started. Once it gets fed about halfway through, I will move over to the other side and support it with my hands as it comes out. What we need to do now is set the cutter head so that we remove the correct amount of material. So what we want to remove is 1/32 at a time. So I kind of want to shift this to the highest spot. It's going to be difficult because there's stops in there, but I can get really close. So with feeding this in at about 3 inches, I want to crank it down. There's a little metal bar right here that's going to contact the wood and tell me with this gauge how much I'm going to be taking off. And I want that to be a very light amount. Now with that adjusted, I'm just going to lock it into place. Pull my board back out. Get it centered up. could see, took about 5 minutes to get here. My first 2 passes, I didn't even really contact. But what I do have is an extremely smooth surface. The beauty of this wood is waking up. I really like this yellow pine. It is a very pretty wood. We have some contact there, and a little bit of the ways up the board. I'm dropping the turret down 1/4 of a turn. Now I just went to an 1/8, and I think I'm not even going to do an 1/8. I'm going to do like a 1/16 of a turn at a time to clean the rest of this off. We're at multiple passes so far, and you can see that this end has kind of cleaned up. This feels incredibly flat. There's a little snipe right here, which kind of what happens when the first roller grabs it. The cutter wheel gets here, the second feed roller hasn't grabbed it yet, and it'll give a little dig. And there's ways around that or to make it better. But you can see here, and that'll sand out that snipe, so I'm not worried about it. But you can see that we're taking away from the center, or we're removing that cup, and that the outside edges haven't been touched yet. And I'm really happy. We've got this corner is a little bit high, so it's removing that. We've got a little bit of snipe right here also. You can feel it, probably really hard to see, but it is cleaning up really nice. I'm really happy with that. We have some screw holes from before that I'll be filling them in when I do my final sand on this before it all gets put back together. I'm going to continue feeding this through until this side is completely flat. After multiple passes, I've just about got it. There's a little spot right here. Other than that, we are looking pretty good. Nice and smooth. I wouldn't mind removing a little bit more right here, as I can still feel a little funkiness right here, and it's probably because of a grain reversal from these knots. And I just want to point out too that you want the grain facing toward you as you're feeding it through the planer. The feed rollers spin this way to pull it through. There's two feed rollers in here, but the cutter head is spinning the opposite direction, and that's why you want the grain facing toward you, so that it is cutting with the grain and not against it. Also, I've been using the dust collection, and in all realities I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, there's just a little bit of stuff here and there, but it's no big deal. I have already filled 2 5-gallon buckets with shavings, and it's ready to be emptied again, so it does fill up pretty quick just to plane off one face. Okay, I am really happy with this, and I am calling this good. It's got all of the surface that I wanted cleaned up, and we should be flat all the way across. Look at that. I am extremely happy with that. It's nice and flat. That means that the bracing I put underneath did its job. I'm going to go ahead and pop it off of here. I was worried that this hot glue wasn't going to stick very well to this melamine, but it does. In fact, it removes the melamine when you pop it loose. So, there we have it. Now what I want to do is pop these strips off. And then I will send this side through. I want to get this glue off of here. As you can see, the cup still remains in this side of the board, and this was the better side. It wasn't super cupped. You can see the little distance in there, and how this side is perfectly flat. I am really happy with that. I'm ready to get this side through. I also want to add, this is the DeWalt DW734 planer. It is the least expensive DeWalt planer you can get. Not the cheapest planer you can buy, period, but the cheapest DeWalt. And the nice thing with this is it's under 500 bucks, or it was before all pricing got crazy. And it has a 3-blade cutter head. Most of the cheaper ones only have a 2-blade, so you get a really nice result with this 3-blade. Also, I just want to say with this cupped wood, I've noticed that, especially with the cup up, that it was very difficult to get it to feed underneath, and because the board was thicker on one end than it was on the other, when I first fed it in, the feed rollers pulled it maybe a foot and then quit pulling it. I had to slide it through and come back around and do it again, and it did that for about 4 or 5 passes before the feed rollers were finally contacting the entire board. I've got it adjusted now. I'm going to take off about a 1/64 of an inch, at least on this end. I think now the levelness of the board should be fairly consistent, and the feed rollers will grab it the whole way through. But I'm only expecting it to cut on the outside edges and nothing in the middle, even though the gauge is right here. So it might come in 3 inches on each side when it cuts it. We'll find out. We're going to feed this through right now and see what we get. was not expecting that to happen. So it cleaned up almost the entire board in one pass, leaving just a little bit right here to still clean up. So I'm shocked that it did that, being that it was such a light amount that I had the gauge set at. But it just goes to show you, I should have tried to feed it through a little lighter first. I'm pretty sure we plugged up our dust collection system. That was a lot going on. I tried to raise it up a little bit as it went, and I did. So I know that it's not consistent. So I'll probably leave it right where it's at and run it through again. Also, if you noticed, I did not lock the head in place, and that was kind of the reason for that. If I needed to pull it up quick, I could. But anyway, a little shocked that that happened. But then again, that's the inexperience from using this tool, especially with cupped wood. So I've been drawing a line on here just so I can see where I'm at. And this is the end of the board that was more predominantly cupped. And we're really close to getting there. My collection system is full. I'm going to empty it. I'm going to send this through 3 or 4 more times until it's cleaned up, and we'll take a look. Ran into my first little snag. This is a turret stop that they've put on this planer, and it will allow you to go from 0 to a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. I had it set at 3/4 of an inch, but it won't allow me to get there. Let me show you what I mean. I still have a small area right here that didn't clean up. No big deal. I could sand it off, but I just wanted to check the thickness of my material. Now 3/4 of an inch is 750 thousandths, and we are at 775. So we are not at 3/4 of an inch. So I'm adjusted that. There's a little bolt in there that you can adjust, and I've adjusted it all the way down. It's gotten me closer, but we are not at 3/4 of an inch. So I am going to put it on 0 and trim it off, and I'll just keep checking it with the calipers. I do not want to go any thinner than 750, but I'm okay with that. So with that little bit more, this end has cleaned up, and I am good. I'll still use that turret stop, and then I'll know that I'm close and that I can take 3 more. We are slightly under. We're 3 thousandths underneath of 3/4 of an inch. I'm okay with that. That's a fine looking board right there. I am going to continue on, and we'll come back and take a look at a couple of the other pieces before we wrap this up. Real quick, I just want to show you, this is the panel I glued up, and I want to run it through next. And it has a little rock to it. So what I want to do is I want to shim it on one side and on the other side to eliminate that rock. And then I will glue it down from there. I'm also going to put maybe 2 or 3 shims here if I can fit them in, and the same thing on the other side wherever I can fit them in. Then I'll hot glue it all down and run it through. I've finished running one side of the glue up through the planer, and I have used wood putty to fill in any of my gaps and inconsistencies, and I'm happy with it. I'm happy with it. I can't complain at all. But I just wanted to show you, by putting it in the jig, the side that I planed. As you can see, there's very little rock in this board itself. There's a little bit still here, but very little. If I turn it over onto this side, there is a whole bunch of rock left. So running it through the planer bed on this flat surface now, I'll remove all that from this side. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. There's a few things I'd like to point out before we wrap things up here. The planer is a little bit slower than I thought it might be. It produces a whole bunch of shavings, which I wasn't quite expecting either. I knew it would be more shavings or more sawdust created than per se a table saw or another circular saw or whatever. But this thing produces huge amounts of shaving. One side of the board almost filled a whole trash bag. So it's immense what it's peeling off and how little you can take at a time. You can take more if the boards are narrower according to the instructions, but these wider boards, they want you to take it easy on it. I've also discovered that I need to pay more attention to the thickness of my board, because earlier you saw I fed that one through and it just gobbled a whole bunch off. And I wasn't expecting that, but then again I didn't measure the board to make sure that that wouldn't happen, and I need to do that. So there's some things I'm learning about this planer, and I'll probably make a separate video on just the things that I've picked up using this little bit. It's, you know, like I said in the beginning, my first time using one, so I've got a lot to learn, and I'm going to share that with you. That's all we got for this time. If you enjoyed yourself, click on the playlist or the video that's going to pop up next to me. And remember to always respect the power of your power tools. We'll see you soon.